Welcome to a new episode of Advancing Consciousness series with Franco Di Nicola. This is a place where people can come to gain further insight and clarity as to what is going on and how we can shift things on a personal and global level, while also accessing higher levels of consciousness and awareness. We bring this series to you free of charge so that many are able to access this information. However, if you resonate with what Franco shares and you would like to support his work to get more content out, contributions are welcomed and greatly appreciated. A link is in the description and will be provided in the chat if you feel guided to do so. Also, we have many previous workshops, such as the most recent, Bringing Out the New You to Play in the New World, along with our membership program, Let's Talk About You, where like-minded people come together bi-weekly to talk about the topics requiring deeper understanding and clarity. All of these are available on Teachable, and we encourage you to check them out as they are great resources at very affordable prices to assist in better understanding this human experience. The Teachable link will also be provided in the chat and is also in the description. And lastly, don't forget to share. As more of us come together who are creating shifts in themselves, the more effective it will be to shift things globally. Thank you for joining us and being part of the change. Enjoy today's broadcast.
So, welcome everybody to another episode of Advancing Consciousness series. We're on episode 20. We're doing part 3. We're continuing on the common sense in our world systems. We had to break it up into 3 parts since there were a lot of points we wanted to cover. And here we are in part 3. We'll see if we can get it all wrapped up today. And if necessary, we'll go to part 4. But at this point, we're looking at covering everything that we want to do. Thank you for co-creating, for being part of all of this at this point in time. The reason that you're here listening and watching and having those stimulations within yourself from your own knowing is because you are very much in alignment in creating a transformational collective experience, and you're very much in alignment in one way or another, doesn't matter what degree, to participate in a powerful way. So when we're looking at all of this and how we're moving forward at this point in time, we are in a position right now where our own inner knowing, that common sense, that realization is very, very instrumental. And the reason I say that is because there's so much information, and as we know, there is so much information, and there is polarized information. There's all types of different ideas being shared. And of course, we have our own ideas that we've adopted and utilized through our experiences in our life. And there are certain stages in our lives where we made those ideas, concepts, and belief systems very powerful, very real to us.
Okay, the sound is low.
It's low?
I just adjusted it.
Okay, so I was just adjusting the sound here. Seemed to be okay before, but it's not at the moment. How is it now? Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, according to the thing, it looks okay.
All right, okay. So we'll keep.
The sound is low, they're saying.
Okay, so we bumped it up now, so we'll see. Just keep an eye that it doesn't get too high. Okay. As we were talking there, in regards to everything that's going on, we've adopted certain ideas, concepts, and belief systems that we've utilized as part of our experience. But now we're starting to get a deeper realization that some of those things may have served us at those points in time, but right now may not be serving us in the same way as it is at this time, only because, or the same way it was before, because right now we're in a very different state. And the state is not only ourselves that have advanced and are growing and are expanding and connecting more from that source essence, we're also stepping into position to play a more powerful role that has not as much limits, or at this point limitless in a way, as you're moving along. So a lot of the things that we've taken on as to experience those limits are no longer serving. But then again, collectively, we're moving forward. The platforms have changed. The frequency of the planet, the frequency of everybody's coming to in alignment in a way, one way or another, to create a change at this time is all come together. So what we are experiencing right now is so aligned and instrumental in a very powerful way to be able to really change things the way that really matches what we are here to do at this point in time. So as powerful as we are, and as powerful that we are now reminding ourselves and stepping into that capacity, that empowered state, that taking the reins in a way to really govern and direct our world, direct our experiences, because it always starts with us first. All of this is coming through. So at this time, the common sense and the inner knowing and the deeper understanding that you may have had at different stages in your life and never acted upon is now coming to the forefront in a very big way. Now, of course, with these energy waves, and here we are on the 23rd of May, we've had some really powerful stuff coming through, and it's still playing out today. But again, it's there to really, stimulate that higher aspect of yourself from a physical perspective, from a human entity perspective, and also the soul is actually grounding more of its home frequency in your whole experience. But at the same time, it's going to create pretty powerful stirring up of rigidity and programs, belief systems, and old stored emotions and experiences that we may have had that left memories within the cells. They're going to come up. So you may feel emotional emotions, and it could be tearful emotions, could be sad emotions, could be exciting emotions too. But at times you're going to feel that heaviness, and you're going to feel whatever. But that's only just coming through to purge through us. That's all it is, and it's coming through at this point in time. But the key here is to understand that this is all staging us to really take the role that we have come here, the excitement that we've come here to experience, to that next level. And this is what we're doing right now. So, when we look at our system of our world and everything that we've adopted collectively, and it doesn't matter how it's been presented. I know some people say, well, there's some ruling elites and this and that have created these operating systems and constructs and so forth. And that's fully understandable. But unless we collectively agreed to participate and agreed to support it, to agree to really go into the depth of it, it was impossible. It was not possible. So in this case here, now we're saying, okay, some of us still are using bits and pieces of this and maybe using a lot more of it as we go along. However, we are now stepping into a state where we're making obsolete all the things that we have adopted that no longer serve in this way of life, this new life that we're unfolding. The planet itself, in the two platforms that are really vivid and active right now, which is the organic 3D and organic 5D, which is all a huge upgrade from everything that we've been experiencing, then we're going to realize at this point that we can harness that part, because it's already moving through us, to really step things up to a higher level. So the thing is that we have to keep in mind that we are doing this together, and any changes that are going to occur is more of us coming into alignment and saying, okay, let's start to create this reality, this world, this experience that we feel, know, and is being streamed to us. Because, we are receiving, okay, tremendous amount of what we can call codes, and we're receiving not only those energies that are coming in, but we're also receiving information from other aspects of ourselves, which are from your soul family, which we can call the oversoul, that is streaming throughout our soul family, all our beautiful galactic friends and connections that we may have had from a soul level, from a human entity level, and a physical level, that have all been supporting and saying, okay, you're now more ready than ever to receive what we are presenting to you, so that we are supporting you in the background, in a sense, to be able to really, because you're the ones here, you're the ones in physical form that are going to be making the changes at this point in time. So when we look at the world, we have to understand, and I know I talked about this before, we have to understand that the world is still very much reflecting the inverted matrix, inverted 3D and 2D state of experiencing. And that is the part that we are changing and basically taking out of the equation that whole operating system. Even though it's not being streamed and supported any longer, it is still very integrated in our experience. And every system is a reflection of that. So it's a reflection of the inverted matrix. And I know when I used to talk about this from years ago, a lot of people couldn't understand what this inverted matrix was all about. People did talk about matrix, that there was a matrix, and we do have a matrix. We have two matrices, or had two matrices. We have the original organic matrix, which every planet has, but we had this inverted matrix. And what you see in the inverted matrix, everything is backwards. So you see what's going on right now. No matter what where you look, you see things as an observer, and when you're connecting with that aspect of yourself as the observer and also able to see things without getting caught up in the game, you get to see how everything is working backwards. And that is what we are taking apart bit by bit and accelerating that process in a huge way as we're moving forward. So when we're looking at that destabilizing and taking apart of that, it's basically taking out. So for example, look at the stuff that's being transmitted right now with information, especially if you are already open-minded and you've already started to observe what's going on. You look at it, you know, you probably heard the news, and then there's fake news. There's the mainstream news and the fake news. So what's so humorous about it, when you really look at it, it actually is exactly what I've been saying about this inverted matrix. The mainstream is giving you propaganda and information that's incorrect. It's information that is actually creating and supporting an idea that has some narrative and agenda or something of that nature, where what has been labeled as fake news, and I'm not saying all of it is not, or that all of it is right on the mark, but there are the majority of it that is considered and labeled as fake news is actually what is really happening and how things really function. And then when you look at the media, when you look at the mainstream, social media and so forth, look at the amount of censoring there is. Because if it doesn't match the narrative of what is being said, this is acceptable, which is all that inverted stuff, because that's the whole idea, is keep the inverted active, that anything that is outside of that, even the questioning, or even just to look at it from a different vantage point, just to even just question any part of it, it's either banned, or it's labeled fake news, or it's just taken out completely, and you can see that. And now there's many, many, many more people involved at this point in time that are sharing what's really happening from a perspective of saying, we're involved, we're seeing what's going on, it does not match what is coming through at this point in time. So this is just giving you an example of what we're working with when we're going through this process. So let's carry on with the common sense part. So let's take a look at education. Education is huge for many, many people in the different parts of the world where, there's a lot of focus on having a good education or having certain levels of education. But when you look at the education system, you ask yourself, and this is where the common sense goes, okay, is education evolving? Is education in one way or another allowing people to use their gifts? Are you able to use their skill sets and expanding that? Allowing for people to question and look outside of anything that has already been mandated as a way of information or way of life. Is education in some way somehow also looking at creating another world of expansion rather than holding on to the very old aspect of it? Because when you look at the educational system, first of all, the focus is a lot on the past, and it also really projects a lot of the older structures and belief systems that were plugged in even without any backing of whatsoever. So it's still, again, in that inverted matrix. It created an idea saying, okay, we got to condition people to think this way, feel this way, and whatever else. And then anything that's outside of that is not going to be put into the curriculum. It's not going to be shared. So now the education system is really going through turmoil at this point in time because of the fact that more people are starting to break out of that and choosing to learn from other people that have kind of figured things out outside of what the mainstream, or what we can call the educational system. So look at it. An educational system is really about taking a child, or even anybody at this point in time, because some people go to school as an adult and so forth and whatever else, taking that child with tremendous amount of imagination, tremendous amount of creativity, with their own particular skill sets. And even because you have to remember that child, first of all, has a body that has an innate consciousness that's expanding and really wants to experience it. It has a human entity that has had many, many lives and has gained a tremendous amount of wisdom, and in many cases is taking a certain skill set that's been developed in each of these incarnations. Then you have a soul that's coming in that is bringing not only some of the human experience at times, especially if it's been here before, but ones that it's bringing from other dimensions, other existence and other experiences. And when you're making that beautiful combination and using the mind as this powerful computer, it has a lot to offer. But here you go into an educational system, and guess what happens? You basically diminish as much as possible what they have as a capacity, and then you are now drilling through a memory process either history or anything of that nature, and old science and old information, and also stuff that is confined to replicate an older system. For example, getting jobs and the way it works and the finances or whatever else. But even that's not even covered. But most of now, I'm not saying all of it is absolutely out, but at the same time, the majority is not in any way a reflection of how creating a more powerful future to allow that individual to really grow and expand and create a powerful change throughout the whole planet. And we're all doing that. So through the educational system, it just conditions us to become another worker, to be, chasing money, to focus on the fact that whatever is being dictated is the way of life. And you cannot question, you cannot step outside the box, as they call it. So when you really look at it and say, well, okay, how does this serve? As you can see, that system was created in the inverted matrix, which is not about growth. See, true education would be we share the highest information, or what we call the highest discoveries, the highest knowledge that's been achieved by all the different people that have been involved and have learned. Top scientists, different medical discoveries that go way beyond anything that the pharmaceutical plays with or anything of that nature, going into understanding the body, understanding how it functions, understanding how science works, understanding various types of technologies, understanding our capacities to be able to be creative in a way where, we don't stay in the status quo, we advance on so many levels. We also look at how our social conditioning and so forth is so limiting, and creating a very open platform, and looking at options and capacities that are outside of anything that we've mandated as a way of life. So when you look at it, it's not about going into a system that punches out another similar of what's been pumped out in the last few hundred years. It's really about coming in as a new individual. So you look at the educational system, it doesn't really allow free, what we call free thought, experimentation, imagination, and creativity. Because I've seen it even in various people that I've worked with, in my own experience too, as even in the early 70s, when I was in my prime in creating different technologies and so forth, and no matter what I presented with proof and actual working models, it was always condemned because it actually challenged the existing narrative and stories, or what the educational system would present. And the thing is too, especially when things were being shared, the whole idea that in one way or another, that if you questioned it, it was a negative response, and the fact that you had to be put back on in line. And this was kind of the things we were looking at. So imagination, creativity was really not something that was promoted in any way, shape, or form. It was like, no, you got to learn this. Now, all of us all have various skill sets. So some of us are very creative in one way, but are not in so others. So the educational system is like a cookie cutter. So everybody has to learn these compartments and whatever else. And the thing is, you're looking at it and say, well, we're going to base it on all of these things. But the thing is, some might be good in the mathematics, and some in science, some in geography, some in other forms of discovery, some in chemistry and whatever else. But, looking at that, you allow each of the childs to flourish in the areas that they choose, because that feels natural for them. And the thing is, too, the education is stimulating their creativity and imagination. It's not keeping everybody in check, in essence. So when we look at that, we look at the educational system and say, okay, you know something? We are here at this point in time to lose common sense and say, does this serve? Does it even match where we're going? Is this still teaching us from an old perspective and creating an old world moving forward? Or is this allowing us to really expand and create a new world? Is it creating another robot sort of thing? Because, we got to do this whole, follow the educational system and then get a job or get some form of career of some sort or whatever, and then, live a life where you're still in survival throughout the whole process. This is the thing, is that you have to look at it. Does it make sense? Does it to support that? Or do we now say, okay, it's time to reform it, redesign it, reshape it? Because if you want to create a new environment, new reality, a new experience, it has to be an open platform. It cannot be restricted in the way it has been restricted. And now, with all the lockdowns and everything else, and as things are shifting, most of the classes and most of the stuff has been wiped out until into the fall. And it's given a lot of students, and it's given a lot of parents to kind of look at different alternatives and different ways of learning. And also at this point in time, it also gives some room for some self-improvement or self-discovery, in the sense of, what do I really like to do? What feels natural to me? And really now look at it in a very powerful way, moving forward from where we are now. So when we look at it, the educational system, does it make sense the way it is? Does it make sense the way it's functioning? Does it actually represent a new world? Does it actually represent a new reality? Does it represent something that is more matching of who we're becoming as a collective and individually? This is the part that we look at. So let's take a look at the next level. The next part is the governmental. So we are looking at the governmental system and the people that are in power and so forth. Now, how did they get in place? we look at elections, we look at different systems and say, okay, well, here we are. We have to put leaders, and we have to put leaders in these positions. And once they're put in there, they have full authority. They can dictate how life is, or maybe there's even a shadow government behind that, which there is, of course, that is not in the public's view, that plays a role in dictating. Okay? So when we are choosing someone, when we're looking at the electional part, we have to look at it and say, okay, who's coming up with these candidates? Who's coming up with these ideas that, okay, these individuals may be the right person? How is it even created a platform? Are they actually showing what their full intention is, or what they want us to believe? Is it, in fact, that they are congruent and in alignment of what they're sharing and what the intentions are? Are they actually going to be a great representation of us as a collective, of choosing to create a different environment and a world that's supportive? Because if you really look at the government, what is a government in its natural state to represent? They're a representation of us as keeping a harmony, balance, equilibrium, and making sure that the environment suits and serves the groups that they're working with. And when I'm saying that, I'm not talking about individuals in business, individuals in different organizations, or even the shadow governments, but we're talking about the public. What is the well-being of humanity? What is the well-being, and working and allowing everybody to participate? Because when you look at it and say, even like for example, laws and rules and regulations and bylaws and all of these things, anything of that nature to be even plugged in as part of our governance of any sort for us to play, it has to be provided to us in a full explanation of saying, okay, with the feedback, and we've investigated and so forth, that it looks very beneficial if we enact a particular rule to keep a harmony, balance, and make sure there's equal balance with everybody. And it creates a platform that everybody feels free and can enjoy without creating any out of balance system. When we're saying out of balance, meaning massive polarization or taking advantage, but even that will change as we go along. So any rule that has to come in, a law or bylaws or any of those types of things, are to be how can I say it? Oh, I just lost the thought. But anyways, it needs to be presented to the group that's going to be involved, meaning the country, the areas. I'm sorry?
Did you mean voted in?
Well, no, not even voted in yet. But at this point, before it's even presented, it has to be presented to the people and say, okay, listen, this is what we have gathered. And here's the pros and the cons of enacting this law, this rule, this bylaw, or regulation of any sort. The pros and cons. And then the community that is involved, that's going to choose to support it or not, because they're going to follow those rules themselves, have the opportunity to say yay or nay, and then decide. And if it doesn't, say for example, it's not matching, and the ratio of people accepting and not accepting is not in huge difference, meaning that it's a very powerful yes or no, then it has to be open and say, okay, what other option or solution can we put into place? What other adjustments can we make so that we can get the majority to be okay to interact with that? And then any rule, any law, any bylaw, regulation, or anything of that nature, needs to be reviewed on time to time to see if it still supports, if it still matches, and if it needs to be removed or a new one put in or anything of that nature. It has to be fluid. It has to be in a way where it's always evolving as we are evolving, as humanity is evolving. Because certain things are going to be put in place temporarily while we get comfortable in our new way of life. So once we've gotten comfortable, we don't need regulations and laws and all of that stuff because we already have our own innate guidance system and we see ourselves as one. So we're going to create an environment where there's no one taking advantage of others. We're all contributing, all assisting one another in one way or another to really move forward in a big way rather than creating that polarity, resistance, or taking down or controlling or anything of that nature. So when you really look at it, it's very supportive and conducive, and that is natural in our operating system. But while we're going through that process, there may be certain things we have to apply, but when they're applied, they're reviewed and they're adjusted accordingly. They're not left on the books, for example, like, as they call it, and then use it. Now, when we're talking about people that will take roles as police or whatever it is, they're there to assist in a way where their mandate is to make sure that everybody's okay with whatever's going on, and if something goes out of balance, they're there to make sure that, and not in the system that we have now where, you know, we're punishing and governing and all of that stuff in the same way that we are. In fact, that, you know, taking a very conflicted and polarized role and trying to put people back in place, or even the legal system that we have at this point in time. So it would be looked at in a very different way than what we are looking at it at this point in time, because we have to understand. First of all, we don't require, when we start to look at it, common sense, do we require all these tiers of governmental and all of these people that we are looking at and saying, are they qualified to play a role that is representative and is for the highest good at this point in time? Or are they working on something that, first of all, they don't understand and they're heavily programmed? Second of all, that they may be having a different agenda and serving a different group rather than the people that they're supposed to be serving or supporting at this point in time. And then looking at it the same essence, do we give them that much power so that they actually govern our lives and we have no freedom to be ourselves, in a sense? So you have to look at it. So there's going to be people that are not qualified, and all the tiers that we have are not necessary. We start eliminating all of that. Eventually the governmental system is just a panel of people that actually come together to present different viewpoints that can be instigated in a way that will help move forward in a powerful way, never to restrict or to have any of that stuff going on. And the other thing is, so when we're looking at all of that, we have to also look at all the different laws and bylaws and everything else that has been applied up to this point in time and look at it. How does all this fit? We can remove all of this stuff because all of it has been made up, and most of it we have not even agreed upon, and it's just been applied for various reasons that support something that's outside of what is the highest benefit for us personally and collectively. It follows somebody else's narrative or anything of that nature. Because when we really understand that it's all made up and none of it is real, and it doesn't matter what rules we're talking about, if it's either governmentals or different levels of structures, or even what we call royalty or religious foundations and so forth, those are all made up along the way. We're in a free universe, which we create the perfect scenario to expand, grow, and so forth, but always knowing that we are one and we are creating an environment that supports us to play and experience in a very powerful way. So when you really look at it from a source perspective, of anybody that's tuning into that source perspective, you get to see that this stuff is all made up and none of it has to apply, but we can easily start removing them all that don't serve and modifying other ones that serve temporarily as a bridging. That's all. And when you really look at it, It's just stuff that's made up that we can keep, remove, modify, adjust, do whatever is going to be necessary. So a lot of the structures and so forth that have mandated, this is the way of life, will be the part that we use our own common sense as an observer and say, do we give power to that? And the same thing goes back to the medical system and everything else that's being shared right now. This is the way it is and whatever else. Like, okay, why are we only getting one side of it? And we have to look at what we call fake news, or what they call, it's really alternative news. But that should be the actual news. But when I say news, we're talking about providing true facts of what's really happening, what are the potential risks, what are our options, and even with the lockdown, and say, okay, listen, we have this thing. Doesn't matter how it came about right now, because that's got an interesting path of entry anyways, and exit, and possibly a new entry. But even what it does, when we look at, okay, let's look at some true numbers. Let's look at really what's affecting. Let's take a look at what really works to facilitate the ones that get involved in having that particular experience, or that what you can call virus or whatever it may be, because it has dubious characteristics. Let's call it that. So looking at that and saying, okay, now this is the scenario. This is what could possibly play out. These are the people that are involved, and we have some options. And here are the options. The options is, we just carry on with status quo and allow our immune system to do whatever it needs to do and adjust. The ones that actually do get sick, then we'll address it, and we're going to use the most advanced stuff that we've tried and tested that works. We're not going to ban it and say, okay, we can't use the basic stuff. We have to use only something that some organization can only dictate or anything of that nature. And then even the thing about the whole lockdown, and say, okay, listen, people, we have this as an option. We have this other part of the option. What do you feel? Let's get a response here. And then leave it optional for the ones that want to participate and not participate. That's kind of how it works, really. Not the way it's been working up to now. Now, I'm not saying there's not a perfection in all of this, because even though how it rolled out had one intent, but the way it's being used is also providing a back-end part that is actually beneficial in one way or another. So for us, for anything at this point in time, for us to implement any part of it, common sense says, if we're going to be participating in this, we have to agree. Okay, yes, we have one level of agreement from a higher perspective, say, okay, I'm going to agree to play the game, but then also to agree, do we go down this path? Do we support this or not? It's really up to individuals and also collectively for the communities and so forth. That's how it actually works. And this whole thing about the legal system in itself, you could see how backwards that is. And the common sense is, wait a minute, the winners does not matter what is factual or not factual. It does not matter if something did play out or didn't play out. It matters like who you can hire that can come up with the most backing evidence or stories, or even make up lies or whatever it is. And so now whoever has a better lawyer, whoever has a better justice system, or what judges in place or whatever, or what emotions are involved in all of this, will dictate what the outcome is. And even the legal system is saying, reinforcing made up rules and so forth. For example, even when the whole thing about banning cannabis and banning, what's that other thing that looks like cannabis? Hemp and so forth, hemp and whatever else that was used very powerfully in our world, that was totally renewable and did not create the problems that all the other resources that we're using right now. When we were looking at all of that and saying, okay, well, someone getting arrested, getting abused, or going through this process. Now, everything is a perfect experience in one way or another, and you have to agree to do that. But to create those types of laws, and this is acceptable, that's not acceptable, and other things are there, that anything that has actually been beneficial gets legally challenged and whatever else. So you can see how the legal system has been, very much in the inverted matrix and the inverted 3D and 2D state. And that is part of what we're looking at it. Go, no, that's not how it works. We now have to look at, if we're going to go down that path, we're going to look at really what's playing out. Because a lot of times, a lot of these laws that are coming into place, for example, taxation and whatever else, have been applied, but they're not even a law. They're just something that they've put into place and whatever else. And then here they are arresting people, doing all types of things that really are not something that has been agreed upon. So there's a lot of rules that really don't make any sense at all. So this is kind of the common sense part. As we start looking, we start clearing out all the stuff that it does not match where we're at right now. And this is what we're moving forward. And this is why the common sense, the inner going, is like, why are we giving power to this anymore? We're done with that experience. We're ready to move on from that. And then we're looking at also the news and so forth. You have to understand, when we're talking about the mainstream, okay, anything in the mainstream of any sort, when you look at it right there, the mainstream, it has its own narrative, even news and whatever else. And what is it? To maintain. It is to maintain. I get that right? No, that's I there. Yeah. Okay. There. I make a mess, don't I? All right. To maintain what we call the inverted matrix, I'll just put it short. Matrix, inverted 3D, and 2D. So when you're looking at all of this and saying, okay, everything that's coming out is either coming through a narrative of being, this is what we want to project, this is what we want you to believe, this is how we want to shape you, because that's what it does. Any form of media, and we're talking about the news, we're talking about the information that we're getting, including education too, of course, but including any types of movies and so forth. They're all there to shape our reality to believe that life is a certain way, and that it's reinforcing over and over and over again the old inverted matrix, inverted 3D, 2D way of life, which is all backwards, saying that's how life is. So anytime we're trying to think differently or so forth, we're pushed against. So this whole conditioning, if you look at it, why is there so much effort in programming us? So much effort to change the frequency of the music, to use certain hypnotic states when you're watching television, watching movies and being exposed. And then you have people that are using propaganda, hype, narratives and so forth. Believe this, believe this, believe this, believe this, and this is what's going on, is because, in a sense, it's trying to keep us in that bubble of this is the old reality and this is what it is. So when you start looking at that, and many of us have already started to realize, when we start looking and we start to open our eyes, in a sense, you see that it's a complete mismatch, and it's almost like, wow, how could we even believe it? How can we give it even power? How can we even relate with it? Because when we're looking at it, it really doesn't reflect our consciousness of how we're seeing it. And I know in my own personal experience, I haven't been able to read a newspaper or watch news or anything like 4+ decades. Because even then, even a commercial is insane in a way when you look at it. Because it's like, wow, that's pure lies, pure this, pure that, all in, that we really reflected this, that didn't match who we are, not only who we are, what it really is. So, and many of us are starting to realize that, and many of us have been realizing it for some time. And you can see all of that, and then you see the hype, you see the stories, and it's like, oh, what are you trying to tell us? Oh, that, okay. How true is it? How accurate is it? Are we looking at the best interest, or are we just stimulating? And when I say the best interest, are we actually looking at solutions, or are we just using reactive and old school, old ideas, old ways of keeping everybody in the same box over and over again? Because if a situation comes up that needs to be addressed, then you bring fine minds together and say, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's dissect it. Let's see what it really is, what it actually does, what can we do with this, what are our options, and let's open our creativity to bring other ideas of how to see this and how we can adjust it so that we move through it if it's not necessary, or advance it if it's beneficial. For example, a new discovery comes along and say, okay, great, let's test it out, let's do whatever is necessary, and let's put it into the system so that we can actually use it to humanity's benefit rather than compromisation, which is the old narrative that is played out at this point. So this is kind of instrumental for us to see that and say, okay, are we still projecting that, or are we opening ourselves up to really open our eyes and move forward and use whatever method to really benefit in a huge way? The other thing is, too, a question to ask you, and you can ask yourself, really, this is a question for yourself. If you were not exposed to constant fear, what they call fear mongering, projecting of fear, projecting of violence, projecting of disharmony, and projecting of what we call danger or being unsafe, projecting that humans are dangerous, or that there are villains all over the world, and that we have to be careful, or that we need to kill each other. And if that is not being reinforced, good, bad, right, wrong, and all of this other stuff, just look at it. If we unplug that, even for 30 days, no input of any of that at all. And when I mean that, there is nothing being watched at this point in time that's projecting that at all. Not what's going on and focusing only on the negative. Because when you look at many of the mainstream media, it's not really saying, you get a good story once in a while, but most of it is focused on what's happening and what's dangerous and what's this. But if that stopped, and then all the violence and everything else you see in movies, music, whatever else that's going on, that's constantly feeding us in that polarity state, if you ask yourself, how quickly would humanity shift and start to feel not only calmer, but actually start looking at each other in a very different way, where they're not feeling that they have to be in fear, that they don't have to be in non-trust or anything of that nature, and how many people will be actually violent? Because that violence is constantly needing to be stimulated. And if it's not, then what happens is our natural operating system, which is peaceful, which is neutrality, which is playfulness, which is cooperative, which is wanting to advance and create a beautiful dance, that's what really plays out. All of that reverses. So in fact, just unplugging that for a period of time, you'll see that this whole fear, like for example, look at the part that's happening right now, okay? How much input, if you look at it, how much is coming through the social media of projecting of fear of death and whatever else? How much is coming on mainstream media? It's almost like everywhere you go. In fact, even the stuff that they've put in where people are now putting masks and doing whatever else that's going on, and the projected ideas of inflated numbers and all of that, the amount of that that's being pushed out is so required, because what happens is people will not react unless you do that, because they don't have a natural tendency, it's only programmed tendency to respond in fear and negativity, or fact that, oh my God, the world is ending, or this is happening and I have to protect myself and I got to do this, I got to do that. You will see that starts to fade, because unless it's projected, and this whole fear of numbers and this and that, even though all of that started high and it's lowering and lowering, and then all the different directions they've taken, that would have shifted. People wouldn't have reacted this way and would have, responded in a very different way. So the amount of hype is being used just to keep it stimulated, and they have to do more and more and more, because what's happening? People are becoming more commonsensical. They're starting to see between the lines. They're starting to see what's really happening, and that is creating the shift. It's like, wait a minute, something doesn't make sense here. Something doesn't compute. Something doesn't seem to be in alignment here. All of a sudden, we've always had people getting ill with flus and this and that or whatever it is. All of a sudden that disappeared. No more. We only have one thing. And yeah, every year we lose people for other reasons. And all of a sudden that's almost next to nothing. And then everybody's just this other thing. And it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. What's going on here? Are we actually receiving correct information? Are we even responding and reacting in a way, or taking steps, we shouldn't even say react, taking steps that are actually beneficial? And then, are we using something that is beneficial, or is it just a superficial, some idea that actually does the opposite? Okay? Are we wearing something here that is actually reducing the amount of oxygen and intoxicating ourselves with CO2 that we're supposed to be clearing out of our bodies? Are we hosting bacteria within that thing that's collecting it? And are the pores even small enough to even be possible to filter something like that? I mean, you look at it and say, well, are we really looking at what really needs to be looked at, or what? So these are some of the things that's where the common sense inner knowing comes along, and especially now, because the amount of stuff that has been projected, and how much more is going to be projected along the way, we have to get into that state of common sense, state of inner knowing, and say, wait a minute here, let's look at this completely different. How can we create an environment that serves all of us here, and it is actually beneficial, that actually allows us to go through our process of what we're going through? Because when we look at it right now, for us to really change the direction of our life, to go in a different path, for us to be able to do that at this point, we have to understand fully and completely within ourselves. For us to redirect ourselves, we have to start looking things differently. So it's a whole redesigning of our way of life, redesigning the way we have created our systems. So the key here is to look at all systems. And we're going to look at all systems and see, is these systems in alignment with the world we are choosing to create? See, remember, we are all co-creators, each and every one of us. We're all involved in this creation. We're involved on the direction that the planet and us as a civilization, as a collective, the human collective, moves forward. We are all involved, each and every one of us. It's not separate from us. And again, we're not here to look for the savior that comes along with, we're going to fix everything. The thing is, this is a collaborative process that we're going through. Because for us to come together and be in that empowered state, that's how we change it. Because if we want to look at how the world is created, remember, it's just a field of energy. It is just codes that actually are constructed to create layers and layers of reality. We are the ones that are creating our reality. This is the reason the so-called elites and whatever organizations that have been, which I've talked about before, and others have talked about, their mandate and has been for the longest time to program and condition us to shape the world according to a specific narrative. Because we cannot be free agents. What do I mean by that? Because if we were free thinking, open to see and not be conditioned, the world would be very different. Our lives would be very different. We would be advanced tremendously. The reflection of our systems and our societies would be nowhere near the way it is right now. The planet will be cleaner. We would not be bound by all the restrictions that we have now. Most of all of the technologies we have that are archaic and have been obsolete, in some cases over 100 years or more, and some weren't even to be introduced at all, wouldn't even exist. Our way of life wouldn't exist. The amount of stuff that we have and the focus that we've put into our life as a way of life would have been completely different. And we wouldn't have lack, starvation, illness, because we would automatically say, okay, we have these particular things that we need to look at. Let's find solutions. Not only solutions, let's see how we complement all of that. Because even if you take the ailment part, the body is a beautiful, powerful, innate consciousness that adjusts and has a functionality that adapts and will take care of anything and everything. If we don't create an environment that nurtures the opposite, then we wouldn't have that experience. And if anything did come about as a challenge, for example, the body would adjust. But if something was required to create a powerful way of adjusting any of that, we would come together to do so. So going back, our air would be super clean. Our water would be super clean. We can't go hardly anywhere where you say, I can drink water from wherever I am. That was never the case before. Now you look at it. The same thing with soil, with the same thing of the material resources that we're using, the inefficiency, the structures and the infrastructures that we have, all of that wouldn't even be in place because we would use specific technologies that are not only renewable but perfectly balanced in a way where it would be supportive and super clean. We wouldn't have any ideas of lack or even have to have monetary systems or anything of that nature. And that's the direction we want to go. So when we're looking at our timeline, okay, not that we're going from A to B, then that this is the outcome B, and we're here. The timeline that we're in is that we're right here at this point in time and we're moving along, and as we're moving along we're making adjustments and alignment constantly. Up to this point in time, the focus has been looking back at the past, but not only the past, a very limited amount of the past that was very completely inverted matrix 2D, inverted 3D and 2D, okay, way of thinking and so forth. So moving forward at this point in time and looking at life in an open, expanded way, we would adjust. And this is the thing, you know, when we're looking at probabilities and possibilities of there is another planet called Earth. Well, quite not what we call Earth, but in a sense, a very matched operating system with matched physicalities that are in another universe that has not been impeded with this for any long period of time at all. A little sampling, yes, but not impeded by it. And that world is completely different. And that is being brought here so that the souls that are here can get to experience it. And now the souls that are participating at this time are going to be the front row, what do you call it, front line movers of making those changes going along. So when we're looking at moving forward here at this point in time is bringing in ways to create a reality and a way of life that actually matches what our true design is. And I know I've talked about it, our true design was 15,000 years ago, went through almost a stage of 5,000 years of, evolving and so forth before the modification came along, and now we're reversing from that. But bringing that into place in a more advanced state. So right now is what are we doing? We're looking at our lives. We're looking at the world or all of our systems and saying, okay, when we tap into ourselves, what actually matches our potentiality or our potential? What matches what we have come here to offer? What matches our true nature? What matches the consciousness that we are bringing in, which is the main designer of reality? That's the thing. We've always talked about an advancement of consciousness would advance all society, all experiences, and so forth. And that's what we're experiencing. But bringing that part into place, then we could see how we can adjust every part of what we've been experiencing up to this point in time. Now, I know there's fear, there's ideas that in one way, if we don't fight, we don't do this, we don't do that, that we're going to fall behind and actually go into a police state or this of that nature. That option is available. It's a small potentiality, and if it even did roll out, it would be limited and it would collapse in no time at all. However, do we need to lead it that way, or are we going to say, wait a minute, we are now choosing to be in the driver's seat here, so I'm now going to use my creativity, my imagination to project this reality of what the world that lives within me, that we've brought as a seed to be represented on this playground that we are here to play together with. This is the thing. Most people were not ready until just recently to really jump into what is being shared and what within yourself for the longest time. And the thing is, now it's being presented because the environment is so nurturing, so perfect for this huge transformation. Yes, it started, from 87 to 2012, from 2012 to 2020, and here we are in 2020, and we're, latter part of May. And you can see how much came about just in 2020. Where we're going through right now. Sure, accentuated polarities. Sure, accentuated limitation, accentuated expansion and growth, and also the capability of having all of these adjustments that are going on with us energetically, consciously, but also in encodements and re-stimulating parts of our DNA, re-stimulating the crystal parts of our bodies that actually harness information and frequencies that create new realms of experience within ourselves, within the collective. So you see how much has provided us up to this point in time. And here we are at a time where, our world is being rocked. We're being rocked. And the reason that we're feeling the rocking, because we're purging all of the stuff that was the old. But the reason that the world is being rocked is because at this point in time, we're purging all of the stuff that was been held on to for so long. But it was not only just held on to, it was part that we adopted, we utilized through our own programming and conditioning. Is it too late for us to say, well, I've been programmed and conditioned? Like, what's the old analogy? You can't teach an old dog new tricks or anything of that nature. How true is that? That's just an idea. There's no tricks to learn. It's really just bringing that true state of yourself through and open yourself accordingly. So when you're really looking at that, when you see how all of that is playing out at this point, how we're stepping into it, we are at this point primed to play an active role in all of this and to really be participating in a powerful way. So here we are, and we still have some time to go with all of the changes that are going along. But this accentuation that we're experiencing personally and collectively is us calling it in, and also utilizing our beautiful brother sister souls, and also the different energies, that all of the different support mechanisms that support the human condition and experience and planet coming through. So the energies coming from the sun, the frequencies, the codes, the spectrums, and so forth, from the central sun, from our own planet itself, and everything else, and including ourselves and the connections that we have, are all instrumental, all playing a role. So you can see how things are moving quicker. So right now we're looking at it and say, okay, how do we adjust our world? And this is why we talked about the common sense part. It's like, okay, now let's step back and just take a look at this. Does this make sense? Does it really resonate with me? Does it actually support? But you have to look at it. If there's a polarization that comes up, of fear or anything of that nature, or right, wrong, good, bad, then that's still part of the conditioning. And of course, we all have an ego that we're still, deprogramming, which has a very interesting operating system, or what we call software. So what we're doing is deprogramming that. And part of that deprogramming is removing all these programs that it can actually access and build upon and use on different scales. So we're all doing that right now in a very powerful way. And we have to understand there's going to be a lot of individuals that are not going to want to participate at this point in time and want only the status quo. But the thing is, nobody's going to be able to go back to the same level of status quo. Everything's changing no matter what, to what degree, and how much they participate, and what polarity they maintain will be something that will be determined along the way. But it's becoming difficult at this point in time to really stay in any locked up pattern. It doesn't matter how asleep you may be, okay? So when you really look at it and say, well, you can stay asleep, but you're getting nudged and nudged and nudged, and the whole planet, everybody on the planet is getting nudged. Even the extras, that's 63% of the population that are just taking the role of an extra at this point in time. They're still supporting the polarity only to assist the ones that are moving forward. And then they can join and participate, or they can be just, choosing to leave at any point in time. But they're all playing the part. So this information really is for the people that are ready and already know this. And we're just stimulating any parts of it. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover, or that any questions or expansions at this point? Okay, I'm just looking to make sure. Okay, so if there's any particular area you want to expand on, we'll take a couple of comments or questions at this point in time. But just to carry on, I get the question, people, how do we move forward from this point? How do we come along and make these profound changes? Well, like I was saying before, we're not here to rely on, say, the energies coming in, the portals that are opening up, in which we just had one. And we're still feeling that. It's not about the portals. It's not about our brother sister souls that are from other dimensions that are working here, and they have their ships here, and they're coming and going and so forth, and about certain individuals. It's not about all of that. Everybody's playing a part, but no one's actually taking any part of removing our experience. It's really about us being stimulated in ourselves and really doing it together. So when we look at how do we go from here, it's about looking at our lives and say, okay, what parts of my life really, truly, truly, truly resonates, that truly makes sense? Say the choices I'm making, the directions I'm going, the way I'm choosing to live my life, the tasks and roles and positions and role-playing and whatever else that I'm doing, where I'm putting my energy, where am I putting my time with, and so forth. And looking at your life and say, how much of it is this, inverted matrix 3D that I'm still playing out, and how much of it is actually bringing that higher consciousness and going into what we call the organic matrix, but really it's the organic 3D and 5D state. And how much of that, because many of us are being challenged hugely in our lives because we are on certain paths, we are locked up in certain patterns, we're on continuous cycles, or what we call hamster wheels or roller coaster, or whatever you want to call it, a way of life that is no longer matching what we are becoming, what is being stimulated within you, what is being changed within you. Because your higher self and every other part of you is promoting that. And most of those so-called hamster wheels and whatever else is really just by the ego's operating system that's reinforcing it. So it's now looking at your life and saying, okay, what matches, what doesn't match, what resonates, what doesn't resonate, and how do I move forward from this? Making adjustments accordingly, but being attentive. So what happens is being present, being aware of where you are, what's going on, and at each moment, you can now sense what feels in alignment for you and what does not. For example, we may have the idea that I need to do this. So you go and do it. But if you're paying attention to it, how much of it does resonate? How much of it feels natural to you? How much of it is actually something that you support and would love to continue with? That gives you the indication that it's time to look at it and make adjustments. Now, if there's an emotional charge about it because I hate it or something of that nature, that's an indication that the ego's playing the opposite side of things, which is the polarization part. But that's the part that you make adjustments. So you want to get to the neutral state and say, okay, this does not match any longer. Great. Now I'm going to look at how I can shift away from it, adjust it, or just unplug it completely. You were going to say something.
Yeah, this will be in regards to what you were previously talking about. Margaret is asking, Franco, what do you know about our birth certificate and us being part of a corporation and maybe a lawful rebellion by changing it in common law court back to a human being?
Okay, I think I talked about
Did you talk about that
it yesterday?
2 days ago?
2
days ago. Okay.
Yeah. So
sorry.
it was in part 2. But when it comes to the birth certificate and so forth, I did cover the fact that, it's just a made-up concept. No one has any power over anybody else. There's no paperwork that actually condemns you to be owned. No one can own anybody. And a birth certificate does not become a corporation. It is just fictional numbers plugged on a piece of paper or card or anything of that nature that goes into a system and says, okay, now that you were born, and now you get a birth certificate, now you belong to a corporation. And as long as you're a corporation, you're not a free being. And as long as you're not a free being, then you have to abide by these laws. Because a corporation is the head corporation, which is governmental and so forth, now governs you. And a lot of it goes to banks and so forth of that sort. As much as that all has been plugged in, it really has no power over you or value. But a lot of people give it a lot of power. Say, well, no, you got a birth certificate. And I talked about the fact that, you have up to 7 years old or younger than that. I think 6 or 7 years old, where you could actually go back and say, no, I want to pull out of that agreement that my parents made because they didn't even know that was even an option, because automatically I was born and stamped and whatever else, and now I get a birth certificate, right? And now what? I'm owned by a corporation, and I've become a corporation, and that's why I have a number, which they call a SIN number, or there's a birth certificate number or something of that nature because of that. So the challenging of saying I got to go to the courts and become a free agent is just an exercise of playing the game of the game. So it's the opposite side of the game. But the point is, when you perfectly say, listen, this is fictional, this ownership is fictional, no one has power over anybody else, and you know that from within, you basically already negated anything that was there. Okay, and not only negate it, it was never had any power, but it was just the idea. So a lot of the so-called structures and governmental systems and so forth that actually keep projecting the idea that, okay, and that's why they spell out your name in all caps and all of that stuff, because they're saying, okay, well, you're a fictional company now. You're a company. You're now a corporation, and now we have rights over you. Well, that is all made up. But we made it real because we abide to it, and that somehow we've constructed all these legal systems and so forth that are reinforcing it. But it's not the case. So it's really, at this point in time, as we're moving forward and that realization comes in, and people say, well, no, I'm not a corporation. You can have your card back. You can have whatever, right? But, you know, until the system is changing further, then they're going to say, well, you can't have a license, you can't have any of this stuff. And then, of course, you got to go through this legal process to get yourself to become a sovereign being. Well, you've always been a sovereign being. You've always been a free agent. It never changed. That's all fictional. Okay? So there's the two ways about it. Either you do it with the game, or you step out of the game. It's fictional. It's not true. Whatever, you know, we have the freedom to do so. Now, as more people are realizing it and more people are stepping out of it, because, you know, I talked about the worth, the self-worth and whatever else. When I'm talking about self-worth is the fact that, you know, the monetary system, it's not where, you know, you're getting money and you have to be worthy of receiving money or whatever you're going to do. In fact, each one of us has full access to the planet. Each one of us has a certain value, and nothing has to be tied into any minerals and resources or anything of that nature, which is kind of the game we play. But that's all just game. It's all made up. I know this might, you know, shock some people, but it's just the truth. It's all made up. Every rule, every idea, every concept, every law is just made up, and it's up to us if we choose to support it or not. Right now, of course, there's going to be a lot of people say, oh, no, you can't step out of the system. And this is why the legal system makes it so difficult for you to relinquish that fake piece of paper anyways. And then the whole idea of a legal system having power over you, or the fact that some judge has power over you and decides what your fate is, or where you go, it's just a game. It's not true. It doesn't actually have any power, but because we reinforce the idea that it's true and that they have power, then we're playing the game. But more of us realizing and say, no, you have no power. In fact, see you later. You can say see you later to every single government task and everybody else. I mean, if you're talking about police or something like that, they're there to serve the collective, not an identity or a corporation or some legal system of some sort, which is all made up anyways. It's there to support humanity, but it's not working that way. So once we come to that realization, I come and say, wait a minute, they're here to serve us. We're working together. They're another aspect of us. And in fact, you have to understand the ones that are reinforcing have to also come to the realization, which they're starting to do so, is that whatever I impose affects me too. Because they're in the same boat. We're all in the same game. When, you know, we all stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, we're not supporting this. Like I said, you know, when we go back to that whole pyramid thingy, you know, this small group here, 0.001%, that is dictating ideas, and then all the other ones that are reinforcing it, which is the 1%, and then the different, the 10% and so forth that are going down the line. None of this can exist unless all of us participate down here, and that's what we've been doing. That's perfectly clear that that's what we've been doing, and it's been absolutely perfect. But now that's it. It's done. It's done. So it's just the moment you say, no, we're not supporting it. No, we're going to let it go. Bang, gone.
Okay, that's great. So you don't need to go into the court system and claim our sovereignty because it's just another action inside the game we're playing. So we just would keep it more alive because we're not sovereign.
Yeah, because the whole idea is the moment you have to go fight it,
yeah.
The moment you're going to go fight it, you're giving power that thing is there and it actually has power over you. Now you got to use your power to fight against that power. Now, that was necessary to a certain degree because the level of unconsciousness and the level where people were giving so much power to it, and this is why people are afraid of what you call the legal systems and governmental entities and all of this other stuff that's going on, where it kept, you know, putting rules and so forth, and, you know, all of those ideas, because everybody was brainwashed, in a sense, where you go conditioned and programmed that, oh, that's the Almighty and we have to follow these rules. And, you know, even religions do that there's some deity or something of some sort out there that's actually demanding that the game is played a certain way, or, you know, eternal punishment and so forth, which is all fictional anyways. It's all made up. It's part of the game. And yeah, okay, we can make up any part of the game and play the game, but do we give it any more power? It's really up to us. So we say, no, we're not playing it anymore. We're not supporting it. And that's happening more and more. Everything collapses. When somebody comes to you and says, well, you know, you either do what it is or you're arrested. Okay? If you got no fear and you have no, say, who are you? You're not an aspect of me. We're in the same boat here. You have no power over me, I have no power over you. But I'm choosing not to support it, so see you later. And that will happen more and more. So it's not about rebellion. It's not about a demonstration or anything like that. It's through peace and love saying, okay, we're just letting you know that you are no longer to dictate how our lives is. Thank you for what you've done. We acknowledge the precious work that you've done in the polarity world. We appreciate you. We love you. But we now set you free from your responsibility, set you free from those roles, set you free to be this beautiful being that you are, without dictating and you know, supporting an old structure or idea that was, you know, very much from a polarized operating system.
I have a question, another question.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Let's make a find it here. Okay. Jean is asking, what does it mean that a portal opens up?
Okay. All right. So what are portals? Portals are channels of energy that open up, that are coming from specific planets that are within our galaxy. And when these portals open up, it's a channel of energy that comes in that carries not only codes, but also carries a very specific frequency and spectrum of light that is tuned in one way or another to create a stimulation and change on the planet and within the physicalities that are representation. Since the planet is a holographic expression of light and codes and information, so is our bodies and everything on the planet itself, including our whole solar system and so forth, that when these columns or these channels are opened up and allowing that a certain amount of streaming to come through, it stimulates. Now, all of these portals that open up are not foreign. They are matching to some frequency within our bodies, our frequency of the planet of some sort. It may be only a small portion of it, but each time these come through, it stimulates those parts that have become dormant or require upgrades and re-stimulation to go up to the next level of it. So when we are being affected or receiving those portal energies, it is stimulating the cellular structures, the memories, the innate consciousness in our body, the same thing with the human entity, and a lot of times the souls actually can harness some of that itself and also use it to shift. It also changes the way that we're processing information and so forth. It also allows us to purge all of the lower density, lower frequency states of consciousness that were all created within the inverted matrix 3D and 2D. These portals have been opening for a while now, but it was not really the case beforehand. When we were quarantined and we were not connected, very little was happening. But since 1987, we've had more and more of them. And then from 2012 to 2020, there's been even more than ever. And then there are people that actually are like taking a role of a certain frequency they have, and if they present themselves at certain parts, they actually activate certain dormant key codes that are being released to facilitate us. So that's what that is when we're talking about these portals. They're basically energy channels, and really, and in a lot of cases, it stimulates our DNA. It restructures the DNA, updates some of the DNA. We may not be able to use it all at once or something of that nature, but it does that. So that's what it's about. So we're getting a lot of different ones now, and we're getting impulses, impulses, impulses. Now, if you notice, there's a preparation that occurs beforehand, and that's usually the Schumann frequency of the planet. The planet is already receiving the information that it's ready, so it gives a burst, and it goes through our body, through every part of us, to stimulate and to really get us prepared for those portal energies coming in. Okay, good. So hopefully that's clarified. I know there's a lot of people that put a lot of power into the idea of, all these portals and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, they all play a role, and they're all assisting us. It's assisting us to get more in alignment with ourselves and to re-stimulate and reawaken the parts that had gone dormant because we've agreed to do so, and to experience it. Now, some of the dormant, when it comes to the body's innate consciousness, it's been dormant for 10,000 years. Now, of course, at different stages, there's been learning from it and growing from it. The same thing with the human entity. It's been not using its full capacities or even close to its capacities for 10,000 years. And now, of course, since 87 till now, it's been, using more and more of it, right? When it comes to the souls are a little different. The souls have been coming and going, but it still has to come into a body and has to utilize the body, it has to utilize the human entity to be able to navigate on the planet at this point. We weren't really getting that much in that nature. But what's happening is we're the ones that are actually going to be making the changes, or are making the changes, and it's really, and this is why the focus is on changing. Now, a lot of these pulses that are coming in are also through the changes of humanity, because they're the projector of our reality, is also destabilizing a lot of the systems that we have in place that we talked about in the last today and the two parts before that. So in the common sense part, it's stimulating the deconstructing, destabilizing of those systems that have been, somewhat core within how we utilized certain experiences in our journey. So like, remember the stuff that we're talking about, the common sense and everything else, all of the infrastructures that we're looking at, the mainstream, everything, really everything from medical to education to governmental to legal to monetary and everything else has always been the inverted matrix. A lot of it that wouldn't even exist if this wasn't applied. The majority won't. Absolutely. And the few that was there would operate very differently. And that's what we're doing, is we're destabilizing the older structures and allowing the new structures to come in. But the new structures are not going to be so elaborate because it's not necessary. It's more of a guidance or a guideline, but it's actually a bridging. That's all it is. Then we'll notice that we become self-navigators, and the navigation is never solely isolated as for yourself. It is a collective. So that means you're experiencing yourself, but you're also experiencing yourself through others. That means that we are creating an environment where everyone is supported, every aspect of you, because it's not only about the individualized you, it's your collective you, because you are you in every aspect of every representation in form, what we call humans, what we call in sentient beings, and what we call ourselves also in what we call the planetary part. Was there anything else you wanted to share? No? Okay. Not at this point? Okay. So I think we've covered all that we needed to cover at this point. So we got finished. We get do part 3, and that's pretty cool. And I didn't pass the hour and a half mark this time, because usually we're over 2 hours and going close to 2.5 and plus. So that's great. So anyways, that wraps up the common sense and our world systems. We are here to redesign everything, so let's do it with ease, playfulness, and also our creativity and imagination. Spend some time connecting with yourself. Spend some time to really realize that, you know, we actually have a lot of say in how we design things, how we move forward, and we're not in trouble. We're not saying that, you know, we're caught and we can't move forward, or the fact that in some way or another that, you know, we're needing to depend on systems, people, or organizations and groups and whatever else to actually dictate. So, you know, like even the whole idea that we needed, that people had ownership of anybody or resources or anything of that nature, that's all made up. You know, I think the Indian natives or some natives have said, you know, the idea of owning anything at this point in time is like saying we own the air, we own whatever. Until you arrived and taken out form, okay, you didn't participate here. The planet is a part of you, absolutely. But look at it this way. Where does your physical body come from? From Gaia, from the planet Earth. So it is part of Earth, and it's all connected to it. So that means that everything, it's not just your isolated body, the whole body. And that is shared with everyone. No one can cut and carve out and say, this is mine, and now you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to control this, whatever it is. That we need to govern the water, we got to govern the resources or anything of that nature. That is all made up. It's never been. While you're here, you utilize it. When you're not here, the body becomes one with it. Your human entity is merging with the collective human entity, and your soul's off playing somewhere else and reincarnates whenever it chooses. So this whole ownership thing goes out the window, and so forth. You were going to say something?
Yeah, it's about the workshop that we keep talking about.
Yeah,
that
what
we
about
haven't
it?
posted anything about yet, or
All right.
so it's been put off again, people. Just so you know, to June 13th, 14th, and 15th. So it'll be 2 days, a live stream workshop. And then the third day will be not the full day. It'll just be a few hours for Q&A. And the name of it's going to be, or is, Deprogramming, Clearing, and Empowerment, which will be highly beneficial to what we're all currently going through and probably needing some hands-on things to help us move through this a little with more ease and clarity. So
Absolutely.
just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because it's we've had to delay it due to certain circumstances that we were still sorting out some things, and there's been a lot of requests to handle quite a few things. So as much as we intended to do it before the end of the month, which, you know, the original date was this weekend, and then it was postponed to the following weekend. Now we're looking at a couple of weekends away from now. Yeah, I think it's a couple of weekends or maybe more. Yeah. Anyways, as soon as we have it all together, we will let you guys know so that you can register and be participating. The focus on it is to assist you to be able to work with yourselves together, and we're going to do it together, where we're very supportive in going through various processes of deprogramming, clearing out old programs, and re-empowerment, self-re-empowerment, or re-empowerment of self, and really going into that essence of yourself that is here. And this workshop is for anyone and everyone that is feeling within themselves they're ready to really make some huge leaps in their lives, and would like some assistance in doing so. And we will be doing it collectively. So it's over a 3-day period. So the first 2 days are going through all the different processes and so forth. And then the third day, which is going to be a much shorter day, we'll address any questions, any concerns, or any additional support that anybody may inquire about walking through it. The processes itself will require you to jot down certain things and so forth as we go through it, because we're going to use not only techniques and processes to be able to clear certain things, but also to be able to address it. And we'll leave you with tools to continue afterwards too. So that will be streamed live, and and if you join us live, you also get the videos and audio recordings and any written materials. And if you can't join us live at that time, then the videos and audios will be available, and we'll also have any written material that you can use along the way. So that's that, and we are working towards, and we're getting a little closer to put all the pieces together for a new podcast that we're starting up. We will have a YouTube channel because the podcasts are going to be audio, but there's also going to be video. Won't be this type of format. It'll be a slightly different format in a sense, and we'll be covering not only various topics. Of course, each of the episodes will be a lot shorter and a lot more focused on one topic, or sometimes maybe two little topics. And it'll be running a little bit more frequently during the week. It won't be live streamed. There will be the occasional one, but we'll be posting it. So we'll have a new YouTube channel that will be called Advancing Consciousness Podcast, but it'll also be available on iTunes. It'll be available on Google, Spotify, and whatever other different platforms. We're working out the details on that. I think we've got a few things already lined up for it. We've had to get some equipment to be able to do it, and we had help through a very dear friend that has helped us out. Chaitan is his name, that has been very instrumental in bringing in some of the stuff that we needed to make this happen, and he's also been a very powerful contributor. I'm sorry? And donated equipment and so forth to be able to even do this much more effectively than we were before, because now we're actually using equipment that is designed to do this process. I mean, we still require some more, but at this time we're doing a great job with that. We're grateful for all the supporters and everything else to help us do it. So the podcast will be introduced. It won't be next week. Right now we're aiming for the following week, so it'll be the beginning of June, and that will be running. It could be up to about 6 times a week. Shorter versions of it. We'll most likely pre-record some of them, and so they will be available in audio format and video audio format. So we'll let you know when that's up. Right now we're just working out the details. And what else was there? Is there anything else that we have to remind anybody? Besides that, we're getting together again next Tuesday at 4 p.m. So enjoy the weekend. Enjoy everything moving forward. And we'll see you next Tuesday. And we'll have a new episode, episode 21. As for the topic, we'll post it usually a day before. Well, by the way, even with the podcast and everything else, you'll be notified on Facebook. So we will be posting it on Facebook, and we'll be posting it on different platforms at this point so that people know that it's there. So great. We're here to assist. We're here to work together to really stimulate what we already know and put it into our reality of how we create our new world. So till then, go out and have some fun.